What's up, guys? This video is from Julyan. Looks like he's tabling 4 NL on Everleaf 4 max tables. In the lower left here, this Skoglio 6 guy jams in for a little bit over 20 blinds, and he snap called with ace jack. So I don't know, since the video just started, maybe this guy's been acting real crazy. His stats are 59-27, so he's definitely, well, on a 4 max table that's kind of fishy, but it's not like it's not anything like it would be on a 6 max table. I think in order to be profitable calling there with 2 guys behind you, he's going to have to be shoving about, I don't know, a 15% range, which is that's a lot of hands. But like I say, I would imagine that there's probably like some history there, given how fast we call. And it does show a very weak hand, so there's even more evidence that's the case. And then we folded an ace-2 offsuit on the button the next hand there. Even though it's kind of junky, like, it's still going to be profitable to open from the button in just about any game. And if you're going to play 4 max tables, you're going to kind of have to get you're not going to be able to play like super nitty on 4 max tables. It's going to be a lot bigger of a deal than it would be like on a full ring table, just because not that you shouldn't make any profitable range that you can on a full ring table too, but the blinds don't come around as fast, so you can get away with that sort of thing, and this is not going to be as big a deal relative to your win rate. In the upper left, we raise with an ace-queen suited to get called. Super dry board. There's this guy we don't have but 11 hands on him, and he's 82-27. So obviously he plays a lot of hands. That's a very easy c-bet. He's usually not going to have much. I hate the sizing though. Like, let me back that up a second there. We only bet 12 cents in a 34-cent pot, so you're betting like a third of the pot there. I would make it at least like, I understand the board is very dry, but when you're out of position, you bet that small, like, I guess maybe you're trying to make it into a value bet to get him a call with worse hands, but usually that doesn't work out very well, because it's just going to be like, even the times you are ahead, it's going to be hard to get to showdown with the best hand, taking that kind of approach. So we bet small. We do get pretty sure he called. We called, and then the 6 comes off on the turn, which is normally like a terrible card to double barrel, because if his range on the flop is like any pair of flush draws, maybe like a good ace high or something, the turn card doesn't, if he liked it on the flop, he probably likes it on the turn. The only thing that makes it different is that we bet so small on the flop, so maybe he has a lot more just like random air in his range, like maybe he just peeled the flop with a queen 10 or something just because it was small. So a turn bet would work more often than it would, I guess, if we had made a regular bet on the turn, but it's still a pretty bad card. And we get min-raised, which is, we only have ace high, so we're not calling down anyway, but typically he's just going to have a 6 there. or some kind of big hand when he takes that line. Okay, we raise Queen 9 suited on the button in the lower right, and the board comes out like super bad, even though we have bottom pair, so it's pretty good just checking back there and giving up. And with the King Jack upper left, another super bad board, like you're getting called there a ton and just don't have very much equity, so I like giving up there too. Here in the upper right, with our 5-9 in the big blind, just checking, we flop second pair, that, and we have middle position of 3. And this guy checks, you should really bet there for value. It's not going to get called by a ton of worse hands, but it'll get called by some worse hands. Like you can get called by flush draws, gut shots, some smaller pairs. But you fold out a lot of hands that have decent equity against you. Like even if someone just has some random, ace 10, it's still got like 20-25% equity against you. So, betting there, it's going to be, even though it doesn't have a ton of value, it's going to be more profitable than checking. Like, you get called by worse some of the times. You fold out a lot of hands that could spike a pair on the turn, or that could bet on the turn and force you out of the pot. So I like betting there a lot more than I like checking. And this guy overbets slightly on the turn, and the card is bad, so there goes our hand. Which is fine. I like the turn fold, but that kind of stuff is going to happen a lot after you check the flop. With the middle pair and the upper left, we had a 6-7 offsuit there, and some guy bets in a 3 people on an ace high board, even though he's going to be bluffing there sometimes. Like he's going to be bluffing a lot less when there's 3 people than when there's 2. So, folding there is pretty standard, even though the guy's kind of a fish. There's our stats, by the way. And it's kind of a weird set of stats because it doesn't have anything, aggression factor, aggression frequency, whatever. With the ace king in the lower left, okay, this guy Cassius 54 or whatever, he just jams in for 65 cents, and obviously we're not folding with our ace king. This other guy behind us, has another 89 cents left behind that after he calls. It doesn't make a huge difference since you're already committed to this, whether you call or raise. But I actually like raising there better because I don't really think that it changes the range that he calls with. Like if he has some hand that he want to call 65 cents with, he's probably not going to fold it anyway when he has another 89 behind. But a lot of times he's going to call that with a hand that we dominate, and then he can get away on some flops. Like if he has a king queen here on this flop, you know, he still has enough left that he can fold when he misses. So I'd kind of rather get it in pre, but I doubt it's really a huge deal. And then again, we fold ace-5 offsuit on the button. You know, the only time you should really be folding it is if the blinds are like super aggressive, regular type players that are 3-betting you a bunch, versus just about any other, you know, combination of like fishy or, you know, regulars that aren't, you know, super maniac 3-betters. Like, you're going to be able to make a profit there. You know, it might not be your number one choice for a hand to play, but you know, you're between your hand's equity and your ability to steal the blind, sometimes it's still going to show a profit. Up here in the upper left, we raised before the flop with an ace-king and got called by both of these fishy guys. So it went three-way, we were out of position. The flop came pretty dry. It is a flop that is going to miss most of the hands that they play, though. But we bet like a quarter of the pot, and I really don't like that. Like, I'm not really sure what that bet is supposed to accomplish. Like I say, it's kind of similar to the other situation on the same table. You know, while there is some value in it, just because it's small enough that it'll get fishy guys that call with random stuff, value doesn't matter. Like, if they're not going to let you just show down, you know, if they're not going to just call and then, you know, check to show down with air, you know, if the times when they call with random stuff, you know, they bluff when they don't have anything by the river and you can't call them, it doesn't do, you know, you don't really get, you don't ever end up getting the cash in that value. So, you know, I don't mind making a real c-bet there. You'll get called sometimes, or you'll get called more often than if you were in position. And there are two guys and they're fairly fishy, but they're going to miss this board a lot and you have some equity. So, you know, I think betting, you know, c-betting there can show a profit, but if you do bet, it needs to be more than a quarter of the pot. And on the upper right, we had a queen-jack. We raised. We got called by two people. The flop comes queen-9-10, so we have top pair and an open-ended straight draw, which is a pretty strong hand. And in that case, the pot was like 36 cents, and we bet 20. We should be betting more there too, with our value bet, just because, you know, these guys, like, you know, look at their stats: 71-27, 73-13. There's like so many crappy, you know, pair draw things, whatever, that they're going to be calling you with, that you should be betting big. You know, there's just you're just missing value by using that bet size in that situation. Okay, and on the upper right, with the weak top pair on the 6, 7, 8, it looks like we accidentally timed down like he was gonna bet. Like I really don't mind not even betting there with a four-way pot with two people that have position on you. It's a really crappy top pair that's when you're ahead you're gonna get outdrawn a ton. There is some value in it, but like it's definitely not that great. Like when it's four ways and two people have position on you, like in that situation, a hand like that, like it's not going to be very profitable. There's just there's so many bad turn cards for you. That even a lot of times when you still have the best hand, you end up check folding anyway. Okay, on the top left, even though this guy is playing like 77% of his hands, I'm probably not going to see bet that board with just a gut shot. Like, you know, his range is wider than most people's, but it's still a pretty coordinated board, and he's not going to fold any pair, any gut shot, any flush draw. So, you know, out of position there, I don't think like the combination of equity, fold equity is quite enough. And getting it in with the queens on the lower right versus a guy that's 71-29 is pretty much a slam dunk. Plus, he didn't even have half of a stack anyway. Lower right, flop an open ended straight draw with over cards, and make a pretty good sized bet. Obviously, we'd have to call if he shoves there, which is fine, but that's a pretty well played hand. Okay, and we raise with threes, get called by the very loose, fishy guy in the blinds. You know, it's not the greatest flop ever for c-betting, but it's definitely better than the one we just saw, like on the upper left. Like, and this is a similar guy with 70 BPIP. He's definitely folding enough there, or calling with enough there pre-flop that even though the board like hooks up with a bunch of hands, like you can still profitably c-bet. But I hate the bet size again. Like these 1/3. Like it doesn't accomplish anything. Like even if he has a hand, like well, for one thing, he's definitely not he's not folding a better hand. Like like if he has sixes or something, he's definitely not folding this little baby bet. And if he has just say he has some random like ace-9 or something, he's actually getting the right odds to call. Not that would necessarily make it a good call since you can't see your hand. But unless he has like a 2 in his hand, you're actually like giving him the right price to call with just about anything. And it also it adds so much more randomness to the hand when you use this kind of bet sizing, because you don't really, it's very unpredictable how people react to it. With different holdings, so it makes it really hard to put them on a range of hands. Here in the lower left, with the king-queen suited, this guy open raises. He's 61-14, has a decent amount of stack, gets called by a super fishy guy behind. I like just calling there. I mean, this hand plays pretty well multi-way. The pot's going to be big. Like, even when you make a top pair, like, the pot's going to be pretty big relative to stacks, and you're going to be happy getting it in with a king queen. So I don't think there's really any need to 3-bet there out of position versus these super fishy guys. Like, I think you do better just calling there. And we do call, and we do hit a top pair. And it's close here, whether to bet or check. I think checking is okay just because the board texture is so dry, other than, I mean, there is a hard draw, but there's not a lot of straight draws. It's not like a real dangerous board for your hand. Plus, the guy that originally raised is more likely to c-bet, even though there's 4 people. You know, he's a pretty big fish than he would be on a more coordinated board. So, you know, I don't mind betting either, but I think checking here is, I think this is a decent enough board for you to check. Which is what we do. Then obviously just raising, you know, it's a pretty big pot, and these guys are big fish. There really isn't a whole lot of merit to calling there out of position, especially when he bets so small. I like the raise there with the king 10 suited. Obviously, this guy's button limping range. He plays 60% of his hands. It's going to be very weak. So obviously, we're doing very good with the king 10 suited. And even when we get double called, we have a hand that can make a lot of top pairs. On this board, you know, it doesn't hit a lot of stuff. Even though both of them call, it's still fun to see bet here. As long as we don't like make it, yeah. As long as we don't do the third quarter pot bet thing again here, it's just not good. Like encouraging people to call you when you're out of position with nothing. It's basically just throwing money away. And on the upper right, I like that bet sizing a lot more. You know, it doesn't have to be huge. This is a dry board. Your bet is like a little less than 2/3 of the pot. You know, that's pretty good. That'll get the job done a lot more often than the quarter and third size pop bets. In the lower right with the ace king, I'm probably not going to bet the turn there. It's a total break, so I wouldn't expect this guy to fold a whole lot that he called with on the flop. The only real merit to betting the turn is that there's still like a few worse hands he can call with, but not. You know, you can have like ace high or straight draws or whatever, but probably not enough that it's worth betting. So I like checking and just trying to get to showdown because you'll still be ahead a decent amount of the time. Here we raise with sevens, and this guy makes a big 3-bet. So far, I mean, he's only played 27 hands. He's 68-23 with a 20% 3-bet. Like, he's short stacked enough that if this other guy hadn't called, you know, I'd be pretty tempted to just ship it in there because he's only got half a stack. And this guy looks kind of spewy. But with this guy calling, like I don't think you're gonna do nearly as well, just because, you know, the guy's 26-19 so far, so he's pretty tight for 4-max table, 151 hands. So, you know, his range for like cold calling some guys 3-bet is probably fairly strong, and we don't get good enough odds to set mine either. Okay, here on the lower right, this guy that's been fairly tight raises from the blind, so his range is pretty strong there. I don't mind calling in position with the ace jack though. With this, I mean, I can't see it because there's a hand history on top of it, but yeah, there's a fishy guy on the button, so I think that's okay. And it's kind of a weird spot when he makes the baby bet on the flop. I think the call is fine. Yeah, you know, I don't think you have a ton of fold equity when you raise there, even though you have a jack high flush draw. You know, I think calling in position there and seeing what he does on the turn is probably best. Lower right hand, small blind with this ace-9 offsuit. A lot of times I would like this raise. You know, raising the limper, it's definitely like a strong enough hand heads up against this guy. The problem with it here is you've also got this other guy, 67-25 so far behind you, so you're going to end up playing a three-way pot out of position versus two other people a lot. And ace-9 offsuit, even though it has some decent top pair value, like in that situation, it's not going to play very good. So that's probably a little bit loose. Let me back up here for a second. I'm looking up in the upper right hand corner with our ace queen there. I'm pretty sure I probably would have 3-bet that against. Oh no, never mind. I thought that the other guy opened that. I think calling is fine there. There is some merit to 3-betting though, like the guy in the small blind, like basically the merit to 3-betting there would be the ace queen, would be to try to get rid of the sauce guy, that's the guy who's been tight so far, and isolate with a hand that crushes this one to poker guy. The only problem with that is, like, we don't really know anything about this guy that open raised in the first place, so it's hard to say exactly how much he's raising there in the first place, how much he's folding. You know, I think calling there is okay. I think they both have merit, but there's definitely a lot of situations where if I knew more about the open raiser, that you know, I'd be making like a half bluff, half value 3-bet there, that I'd be kind of bluffing against the regular that opened and value betting versus the other guy. Okay, in lower left, it's kind of the same situation as before. Like, you got a king 10 offsuit, which has some pretty good top pair value against fishy guys. But when you're in the small blind, two guys limp in, you're going to go multi-way a ton out of position. Like, even though you have this kind of like decent top pair hand, you know, being out of position and playing multi-way, you know, with this offsuit kind of like marginal thing, like, it diminishes the value of it a lot. So I think that that's not going to be too profitable of a range, even though these guys are, you know, mostly pretty fishy. but I think it's close. Like I think King Jack might be the worst hand that I raise with there, and King 10 probably not quite good enough. And King Queen would be, you know, a very obvious raise. Now in this hand with the King 10, like, after we did raise, we just got called by the big blind, and the other two guys fold. On this Ace 2-3 with 2 spades board, like, that would have definitely been a profitable c-bet, so I'm not sure why we checked the flop there. Then we bet the turn when we hit a 10, which is a good value bet. You know, obviously, usually if he had an ace, he's betting the flop, and there's tons of different, you know, worse pairs and draws and things that he can have. And on the river, it's a pretty bad card. It brings a flush. You know, there are some random things that could have a jack. It makes it harder for us to value bet against a smaller pair. But this is one case, like, we bet 20 cents. It's one case where I actually kind of like the small bet. It's definitely a lot different than, you know, it's a lot different on the river than when you're on the flop, because, you know, in this case when you get called, the hand's over. So you're just betting small to try to get calls out of worse hands from a bad player that probably makes a lot of calls with worse hands. Sometimes it's kind of hard to guess whether or not you're going to be ahead of their range, but you know, the guy's pretty bad. He hardly ever has an ace. You know, obviously sometimes, you know, he will have made a hand on the river, but I think that's a pretty decent play in that situation. I'm going to go ahead and wrap this up since it's coming up on 40 minutes. I would say from watching this, there were two main things that stood out to me. One thing was fairly minor, just that there were definitely a lot of hands folded pre-flop that were pretty standard and profitable opens, especially on the button. You know, when you're starting out, you know, playing lower stakes and things, it's not a huge deal. Like, it's fine to be kind of nitty while you're working on your game and getting better. So I don't think that's a huge thing, but it's just something to be aware of. There are a lot of raises that we could be making that would, you know, show a marginal profit that we're not making. The thing that was the big deal, though, was, you know, like I talked about in lots of hands that came up, was the bet sizing. You know, a lot of times we made very small bets that didn't accomplish much, and, you know, in general, in these games, you know, it's definitely good to be putting in more money with value bets than with bluffs, but at a certain point, you know, you can only bet so small before it drastically alters the range of hands that you get called by. And so even though your bluffs become more efficient as far as, you know, the risk versus reward, the profit goes down because people will continue with the hand so much more often than they would had you made a larger size. So you definitely have to think about what you're trying to accomplish with your bet sizing. You know, if it's a bluff, you know, you have to bet enough that the other person would actually fold. You know, if you're trying to, you know, if you have a very marginal weak hand and you're trying to actually get value out of even weaker hands, you know, that won't actually matter if you can't get to showdown with that hand, you know, as the best hand. So just something to think about. Alright guys, I hope that you enjoy the video. If you'd like to have your own poker video reviewed for free, check out the upload tab on my Facebook fan page. If you're interested in personal coaching or have suggestions for future content for the site, email me at opensourcepoker@gmail.com.